It's day 21 of the US-Israel war with Iran. This is our special programme looking at the key developments from today and where things stand after 3 weeks of war. Well, President Trump has stepped up his criticism of NATO allies, describing them as cowards for refusing to help open the Strait of Hormuz. As attacks on oil and gas facilities continue, the head of the world's energy watchdog tells the BBC the war is causing the biggest energy security challenge in history. A blast blows a crater just inside Jerusalem's Old City after a warning of incoming missiles from Iran. Israel hits Tehran with airstrikes as Iranians mark Nowruz, the Persian New Year. Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei releases a message calling for resistance and national unity. He's yet to appear in public after being named as the successor to his father. Well, over the coming half hour, we will be live with our correspondents across the region and around the world. And we'll have analysis from our specialists in our London newsroom. And as we take a look at the defining moments of the third week of war and the impact it's having on the world. We will be live in the region shortly, but we begin in the US. Over the last week, President Trump has stepped up his criticism of NATO allies for refusing to help the US secure the Strait of Hormuz. Today, the president described them as cowards and said it would be easy for them to allow ships to safely pass through the strait. Well, our chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, is at the White House. Gary, President Trump reiterating today then that the US is doing extremely well in the war, as he said, also lashing out at NATO allies again. What's your assessment of what we've heard from him?
He's pretty angry about the lack of support he's getting from NATO, including the UK, of course, and that's why today's announcement about the use of UK bases is going to be a bit of a victory for this president, albeit a marginal and pretty small one. But he believes that his allies are benefiting, if you like, from the US taking all the risks, not prepared to help him secure the Strait of Hormuz so that oil can get out, and then complaining about the price of oil around the world. And for him, that sounds like NATO not really stepping up. And so you're hearing some pretty strong language. I mean, I don't think he's ever called NATO countries cowards before. That is pretty direct, paper tigers, as he put it. And there was a threat in there. He said the US would remember all this. Now, we don't really know what the plan is for sort of completely opening up the strait. There's a bunch of Marines on the way to the region, a couple of these Marine expeditionary units, one from Okinawa in Japan, and we've learned today from our partners, CBS, that another 2,500 Marines potentially are sailing from the west coast of the United States. Now, that'll take them some time to get to the region, but these are two sort of very mobile amphibious units, often used for landing, from beach landings, etc. And there's some speculation, of course, that they could be used either on the coast itself in the straits to try and secure oil passage, or perhaps for Karg Island, which is Iran's major export terminal for its own oil. Now, all those are pretty speculatory things at the moment, because the president said yesterday he wasn't planning sending troops anywhere, but there are all these troops on the way. And a couple of days ago, he said he wasn't afraid of putting boots on the ground. So the message changes day by day on not just the tactics that the president is prepared to use in executing this war, but also on the emphasis about the outcomes, the goals, how it will end and when it will end.
Gary, for the moment, thank you very much. Gary O'Donoghue at the White House. Well, as the war enters its fourth week, a new wave of Israeli bombardment hit the Iranian capital, Tehran. There has also been an uptick in Iranian rocket attacks on Jerusalem, with debris from a strike hitting the Old City in occupied East Jerusalem. In Iran, at least 3,134 people have been killed, according to a US human rights agency, with more than 3 million people displaced. And across the Gulf, there have been reports of missile and drone attacks. We're joined now by our correspondent Sebastian Usher in Jerusalem and Azadeh Moshiri in Dubai. Sebastian, first to you. There have, as we've said, been more strikes both in Tehran and in Israel. What's the latest on the situation where you are in Jerusalem?
Well, we went a short time ago to where this missile debris fell just on the edge of the old city of Jerusalem. This is the first day of Eid, obviously the major Muslim festival. Normally you would have a large amount of people there going to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This year that isn't the case for security reasons. People have been kept away from there. But where this impact site is only about 300 meters away, not just from Al-Aqsa Mosque, but from the Western Wall, obviously sacred to Jewish people, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this really brought home, I think, to people the fact that the Iranian ability to continue with these strikes, even if they're not causing a large number of deaths or casualties. I mean, there have been, but not on any large scale. And the damage so far has not been that intense, not as intense as I remember last summer during the 12-day war. But this is the first time that I've seen a major kind of impact site. No one was injured. But that impact site right on the edge. And the Israeli authorities essentially have said to Iran, you know, thank you for this gift for Eid. I think this is an own goal for Iran, to be honest. I mean, the idea that they might put at risk with their missiles one of the holiest sites in Islam was something that seemed really, you wouldn't have countenanced it a short time ago. I think people in this area, East Jerusalem, the old city, felt relatively safe because of those intensely sacred sites being so close, and that Iran wouldn't risk the possibility that one of their missiles or debris from one of those missiles might actually hit them. That is now the case, and we have had in the last 24 hours or so here in Jerusalem a much more intense series of alerts and sirens coming in very quick succession. Now, not a large number of missiles, none of them really except for that one making impact, but all of them keeping alive this sense of a threat that Iran still maintains towards Israel itself.
Sebastian, thank you. As a day, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Bahrain all reporting drone and missile attacks in the last 24 hours, so no let-up in the Gulf.
Yes, and as countries in this region are marking Eid al-Fitr, and as Iranians all around the world are marking Nowruz, Persian New Year, a long shadow has been cast on those celebrations by 3 weeks of war. And this is exactly the scenario that countries here wanted to avoid, their energy infrastructure being brought in to this war. Now, a day after a group of Arab and Islamic nations warned Iran to halt their attacks and halt them on energy sites as well, there were renewed attacks by Iran reported in Kuwait, for example. That was the latest one earlier today. The state oil firm KPC reported that multiple drones had hit an oil refinery there, forcing them to close several units as a precaution. Qatar is still assessing the extensive damage at their LNG field, Ras Laffan, and that is going to have a repercussion on energy markets. It's having a repercussion on their export capacity, which is down 17% over the next 5 years. That's what they feel right now. And so what do? Saudi Arabia is the one that has hinted at military action the most, though here in the UAE as well, they've talked about reserving their right to respond, but it carries great risk. It could escalate this war further, and it's worth remembering that these countries, they've built all their plans, all their ambitions, their economies on the energy sector, and all of that is now at risk and is having an impact on global energy security around the world.
Azadeh, thank you very much. Sebastian Usher and Azadeh Mashiri, thank you both. Well, those continued strikes in Iran and across the region come as millions of people in the country and around the world are marking Nowruz, the Persian New Year. Iranian state media have published a written message said to be from the Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, calling for resistance and unity. Well, our correspondent Dan Johnson has been speaking to Iranians who've recently crossed into Turkey and asked them how they felt about Nowruz this year.
There is no Nowruz. Many people are mourning because of the day, 2 months before the killing of people. We want people of the world to understand my country. Very hard, very.
We can't celebrate Nowruz this year unless we are sure of the fall of the regime and that the families of the fallen can celebrate with us.
But heading the other way and carrying opposing views, we met this family supporting the regime.
America and Israel should keep their hands off Iran. We just came to Turkey for 3 days. Now we have Nowruz, so we came to buy things and we're going back. Long live Iran forever.
Dan Johnson in Turkey. Let's speak to Siavash Ardalan from the BBC's Persian service, which is used by 24 million people around the world, majority in Iran, despite being blocked and routinely jammed by the Iranian authorities. Siavash, this is the first Nowruz that Iranians have had during wartime since the 1980s. How are people managing to mark Persian New Year today, if at all?
Yes, as you saw in those clips, some people choose not to celebrate at all, given the conditions, but some people, in fact, find Nowruz and the story of Nowruz a story of resilience. That's why they do want to still keep the tradition alive. And don't forget, Nowruz is a very ancient tradition rooted in thousands of years of history for many Iranians. So even, as you said, despite the fact that even in the 80s, when Iran was engaged in an 8-year war with Iraq, even today they still celebrate Nowruz, and we have seen pictures today just before spring came. In the afternoon, Iranian local time, people were out and about in the streets and the bazaars, not just in the capital, across the country, shopping as they always do before the new year approaches, and trying to make best under the current circumstances. Food is in abundance. You know, the bazaars, the fruit markets, they're full of fruit and vegetables. The issue is the price, of course, sky-high inflation, making it difficult for people really to celebrate it the way they would want to. But the positive side, the half-full side of the glass, is the fact that not a lot of civilian infrastructure has been damaged. There's water running, there are no electricity shortages, and despite that attack that Israel carried out against Iran's gas field, still people have a good supply of energy, and that doesn't seem to change unless the situation escalates, and that's really what's worrying many Iranians, no matter what they think. On one hand, you have supporters of the regime, you call the hardcore regime loyalists, who are out and about today in the streets, in the cemeteries, remembering those family members who had been killed in this war. And then you have people who are very much opposed to the regime. They're staying put inside their homes and just celebrating it with their family, but with a very somber and gloomy mood.
Siavash, for the moment, thank you very much. Siavash Ardalan from BBC Persian. Well, let's turn to military strategy and the current state of play. One question that's routinely the most searched online is who is winning the war? To try to answer that question, here's the Security Brief's military analyst, Mikey Kay.
To me, the big question is, what is the definition of winning? Is it the removal of the mullahs or regime change? Is it protecting the flow of oil, liquefied natural gas and fertilizers running through the Hormuz Strait and into the Persian Gulf? Is it about seizing Iranian oil? Is it about annihilation of Iran's ballistic missile program, or preventing Iran from enriching uranium, or some of the above? To me, it's just not clear. Now, there's no doubt that the US and the IDF have conducted, in the early days of Epic Fury, shock and awe operation. But we saw that in the early days of Iraq and Afghanistan. And that turned out to be a very protracted, long war that turned into a quagmire. For me, it's all about the Iranian asymmetric threat. So their Shaheds, their fast attack crafts, their mines, and their ability to be able to reproduce those cost-benefit ratios at mass. And I think ultimately it will depend on the US's ability to be able to counter that and degrade that and destroy that asymmetric threat before we can even start looking at what the term winning actually means.
Mikey Kay of the Security Brief. The UK has approved the use of its bases for the US to launch strikes on Iranian sites targeting the Strait of Hormuz. It comes after the Iranian Foreign Minister told the UK that allowing the US to use its military bases for operations in the Middle East would be considered as participation in aggression. Let's speak to our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus. Damien, tell us more about this announcement.
Well, this came after a meeting of UK ministers. Now, from the beginning, first 2 days of this war, the UK had allowed the US to use UK bases to fly US aircraft targeting missile sites which were attacking UK interests, UK allies in the region. That now has been expanded to include US aircraft targeting missiles that are attacking shipping in the Strait of Hormuz and associated targets. So let's be clear, this is a broadening of that target list that the UK has allowing the US to carry out. It is not, though, the UK getting involved, as Donald Trump wants, with protecting the Strait of Hormuz. It is not the UK carrying out those attacks itself, but it is certainly a sign that the UK is concerned about those energy flows from the Persian Gulf. Now, opposition politicians here, Conservative Party, really call this a mother of all U-turns. I don't think it goes as far as that. It will concern some worried about UK getting drawn into the war. The Iranians usually saying today, warning that it would be seen as facilitating aggression. But the UK government very clearly saying this is about still responding to Iranian attacks on those who were not participating in the original strikes on Iran, Iranian attacks on energy supplies and UK allies. And the UK's preference is for this to de-escalate. That's what the UK government would like to see.
Damien, thank you very much. Damien Grammaticus in Westminster. Well, the war in the Middle East has prompted a surge in gas and oil prices. And today, the International Energy Agency told the BBC the world is facing the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Let's speak to our Deputy Economics Editor, Darshini David. Darshini, that warning from the IEA today, they've even urged governments to cut road speed limits by 10 kilometres an hour because of this disruption to fuel supplies. I mean, just how big an impact is this having on the global economy?
Yeah, it's an extraordinary warning, isn't it? Normally in these situations we say that energy producers gain, users lose, but this is not a normal situation by any means, is it? Or any kind of normal upheaval in energy markets, because those producers in the Middle East, as we've seen, literally their products going up in smoke, losing out to the tune of billions of dollars. Standing to gain, on the other hand, the likes of Canada, Norway, they may be the kind of countries that customers look to. They're looking for alternate source of fuels, and of course Russia as well. That could be a big gainer indeed. And those big customers of the energy that goes through the Strait of Hormuz normally, those in Asia, they're the ones who are already having to think about conservation measures, for example, 4-day weeks, closing down schools, really disruptive. For the rest of the world and for users across the world, customers, it's really about price, isn't it? And we're already seeing that filter through. And we've heard from the central banks in Europe, in the US and also here in the UK over the last week. Now, they are all conceding that we are likely to see more pressures on inflation. Here, for example, in the UK, they're talking about 3.5% inflation. So what central banks are really stressing here, this is not a return to the kind of inflation we saw a few years ago in 2022, for example. Nevertheless, the expectation is that rate cuts are off the agenda for this year. And those biggest individual users of energy of all, of course, Americans. We may have President Trump saying that America wins when energy prices are high, but in actual fact, it's likely to be a net loser. The other big gas guzzler, of course, is China, we always hear about. But China actually has quite a lot of energy stashed away in reserves, a few months' worth, in fact. So it's relatively insulated on the whole. But make no mistake, the global economy as a whole, as it stands, is set to lose. And what most countries are united in is the speed by which they were caught unawares by this shock. 3 weeks, and they're looking at real challenges to their fortunes, whether they're governments, consumers or indeed businesses.
Darshini, for the moment, thank you very much, Darshini David. Well, as we enter the 4th week of the US-Israeli war on Iran, questions are continuing to pour in on TikTok and YouTube. One very prominent theme is what happens next. Well, to try to answer that question is our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette. Let's start with that. So many people asking that question. It's really gripped people's attention, hasn't it, this conflict? Where could it go?
It's really important, in some way reassuring, that people are asking this question, because we are reminded every day, Martine, that this is a war that affects all of us. The short answer is we just don't know. We hear from President Trump. You heard from Gary O'Donoghue, our chief North America correspondent, earlier in the program, that President Trump keeps sending conflicting signals. He's trying to reassure the markets, who are very, very nervous, saying, well, it's going to end soon, but then he also talks about keeping on hitting the targets. Yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, he said one message in English, which is the war is going to end soon. In Hebrew, he gave another message, which is the war is still going to go on. And I was just reading a report from our U.S. partner station, CBS News, where they say there are preparations underway for ground forces. And as we've been reporting all this week, there are thousands of Marines and more vessels heading from the Asia Pacific, heading toward that theater of war. So even as they talk about ending the war soon, they're making preparations for this to go on a long time. And from Iran, no sign at all. Iran continues to try to inflict as high a cost as possible, trying to establish a new kind of deterrence, to say, don't ever think of starting another war again. That you may go after our conventional military abilities, but we are showing you we can still fight back.
How aligned is Israel with the United States? And
That
its
is
goals?
the question. That was the question people asked, Martine, after the Israeli strike on the South Pars natural gas field. The part of it, it's run jointly by Iran and Qatar. It's the world's largest natural gas field. And it was a major escalation in the war. Oil and gas prices immediately spiked. President Trump puts out a post saying, I didn't know anything about this, and saying in capital letters, don't do this anymore. Don't attack the oil infrastructure. Prime Minister Netanyahu came out and said, I did it and I won't do it again. And yet, Martine, there had been all of these articles quoting in Israeli and American media, quoting unnamed American and Israeli officials before and after President Trump's statement, saying the Americans knew about it in advance. So both leaders like to say we are aligned, but sometimes we differ. And in the broad ambitions, there are differences. Prime Minister Netanyahu, in short, has made it absolutely clear from the start, his overall goal is to bring down the regime.
Another question people are asking, particularly on TikTok and YouTube, is this is supposed to be a period of celebration. Nowruz, New Year for people in Iran, Eid as well, people across the region celebrating. I mean, how's that being affected? Just
it
briefly.
Doesn't often happen that the Eid al-Fitr, the end of the Muslim month of fasting, aligns with the Persian New Year, which is timed with the spring equinox, so the 20th into the 21st. The most joyous celebration, not just for the people of Iran, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Iraq. Many people around the world follow the Persian calendar, and yet it comes at one of the most painful and perilous time that Iranians can remember.
Very briefly, a statement from the Supreme Leader of Iran, but no sign of him.
A 9-page statement, and still no sign. He hasn't been seen in public, he hasn't been heard in public, but there's been a steady stream of statements, because in all of this, Iran wants to send the message, we're still in charge.
Lise, for the moment, as ever, thank you very much. Lise Doucette, our Chief International Correspondent, thank you. Don't forget, there is a live page on the BBC News website and the BBC News app, which is following all of the twists and turns of this conflict between the US, Israel and Iran. Whether you're joining us on YouTube, TikTok, BBC Sounds, radio or television, thank you for your time. We'll be back the same time tomorrow with the Iran War Today.